joining. Financial Task Force, 5th or 6th meeting now. I don't know. We're getting into a rhythm though. I can feel it. Got a brief, short agenda today, but the preliminary things is I want to review the meetings that happened this week. I think some good movements and plans have been forming with some different lending agencies, Bond Bank, Pasumsic Bank, an overarching support and what we need to accomplish before then, before we can actually. So there's like some goals or targets we need to hit to secure those long-term budgets, but also getting grounded in what we can do as a city, what do we need to get votes for, and how that will guide this process. And then in addition to, Chip is here, he's still been working real hard and finding things to help our accounting, and there's been some discoveries there too. So lots to talk about, but I kind of wanted to orient on what we learned this week. Rick, do you mind kind of summarizing?
I think I can do that.
Okay.
Do you want to do an introduction so Colin knows who folks are and folks know why who Colin is and why you asked him to come here?
I will. Colin, do you want to do an intro? Then I'll speak on why I asked you to come today.
Sure. Just like.
Yeah.
Who you are, what you do, how long you been here.
Yeah. No, actually, those are good stats. Real quick.
Okay. My name is Colin Matthews. I work at Community National Bank as a credit analyst.
Yes. You graduated from North Country.
Graduated from North Country, went to Linden State College, now Northern University. Graduated from there, moved out of state for about 5 years, and then came back and bought a house.
Yeah.
And here I am.
Nice. And he's one of those special, like, Newport address, but technically a Derby resident.
Yes.
But right on the line, close to heart, volunteers with NDD.
Yep.
And the reason I was like, I'm going to lean on Colin and see if he would lend an ear is, one, your experience and understanding banking and loans and stuff like that. But you are a spreadsheet wizard, and I think as we move forward and having to distill, I mean, Chip's done a phenomenal job, and we'll look at some spreadsheets, but also as we move forward with communicating what we've learned at this task force to the public, if we're going to need, if and when we go to vote, I want to have strong numbers, and I want to make sure that we've heard the spreadsheet tells a story, but I lack those skills. And so I was hoping, and maybe if Colin had any insight on how do we translate these, a lot of accounting information, but basically into a way that's presentable and digestible, and maybe even tweakable if we were in a meeting and we could say, well, this is what it would look like if we, asked for this line of credit and at this timing. And it's possible, it's a tool, but I have my wits end, or I have limitations with what I can do with Excel, and I know Colin is very skilled in that. So that's kind of the background on why we have a guest today. But yeah, all right. Any questions? Okay, awesome.
So Tuesday morning, we had a meeting with quite a group of folks here. You know what? I think I have all my written notes right on the desk here.
Nice.
Just for them, so I make sure I give it an overview that makes sense.
I left my notebook on my desk at home.
I don't know if they're legible. Yeah.
They're eligible to you.
Yeah. There you go.
Legible is one thing, coherent is another.
Yes. Yeah, lots of arrows that loop back. Well, like this that goes in here. And that's like part of going back to a spreadsheet. It's like, really, if you're gonna leave me to it. See, this goes that, and that means that, and that goes there, but that also impacts that. But then
that's what I did too. I do have a question for you while he's looking up his notes. Mm-hmm. When you update this spreadsheet that I think you're working on, does it automatically update Google Drive?
It should.
Okay. I have been remiss in opening it this week, so I just about 21. So yeah, maybe.
And the column C is like, I'm trying to make it streamlined where like first it was like what action we need.
Okay. So We held a meeting that was as many of the stakeholders and folks who might be involved in conversations about lending as we could get in the room at the same place. At the same time, it wasn't physically in the room. We did it by Zoom or by video conference Tuesday morning. I think it was at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock. Lori was here. Carter was with us. I was on the call. Jim was on the call. I think that's it from the city. We had Dave Rue and Bob Fletcher from SPNF, our attorneys. We had 3 folks here from Passumpsic, Ellen Stanley, Kate Stallman, and Camden. His last name is escaping me. I don't have it written down here. And then we had Ken Ling and Michael Gone. I have his last name right, Chip? I think I do. Ken and Michael were on the call as well. So it was basic, and they were from Vermont Bond Bank. So we had Passumpsic, Vermont Bond Bank. Chip was on the call with us, our attorneys, and then a whole bunch of us from the city. Basically, we asked Chip to do kind of an overview of the work that he's done so far, so people would have a rough idea of kind of where things stand. I gave kind of an overview of what we've learned to date. What's clear is that in order for us to move ahead, we're going to need a cash flow certificate for Passumpsic Bank, which will show kind of what we expect our cash flow to be over the coming year, so that before they loan us money, they know how we intend to pay it back. The big news that we're still, I think, all working to digest is the news that it's not just a question of saying, oh, by the way, we're ready for that bond that our voters agreed we could take, which I naively thought was how it worked. It does not work that way. So Vermont Bond Bank is going to need to work with us at some length to make sure that we are a good risk. And that means that the likelihood is that the earliest we could be in the bond pool would be not this August, but the next one, which would be I think the paperwork would all be due by December, if I remember correctly, and then the earliest we would see that money is March. So what they will need in order to do that is a clean audit. And at this point, given where we stand financially, what they mean by that is a clean audit through the end of this fiscal year. So one of the things on my list to do this week, which I confess I have not gotten to yet, is to reach out to KBS and find out what it would take for us to be the very first priority for them as soon as the books are closed, to have them work on the audit immediately for us. And if we got that clean audit to them and a clear understanding of our cash flow, what all of that will do is allow us to set ourselves up for the first bond, which has already been approved by the voters, for roughly $3 million to complete the water tower project. So that takes care of just that piece. Then we still have a remaining issue, several remaining issues, which are what we do about the current cash flow. And there are 2 issues there. One is, how do we address the $1.8 million that we owe currently to Passumpsic Bank on the line of credit? And the second is, how do we address next year's cash flow? If we started at 0 in July, we would have to run, this is a very rough number, but somewhere above $1.5 million between July and November, just to manage our cash flow before the projected tax income comes in. So there is a thing called a tax anticipation note, and there's another thing called long-term debt relief, and those are 2 different things. One would be related to the operating budget, and the other probably to water and sewer. And what's not entirely clear, what's fairly clear is that according to the attorneys, we have to be working our way toward a vote with the voters about however we're going to manage this long term. Everyone basically is saying at this point this is something that I think we heard pretty clearly from Bob Fletcher from SPNF, that it's clear we're awake and we're paying attention, and the reality is there's no possible way to pull off a request to the voters because we just don't have enough information to know what it is we're even asking the voters. So there's no doubt that we're going to have to come up with a short-term instrument that technically, this is being a little bit loose because I'm not sure I'm using the right language here, so I'll just qualify it in that way. But you know, if all we're doing is addressing last year's debt that was already on a one-year timeline, and we effectively extend that, in some ways we're already beyond what the charter requires because we should have gone to the voters 6 months ago or a year ago or whenever to try and deal with that longer-term debt. And we clearly can't pull that off. So we asked Bob the direct question, you know, if we can go and work out short-term solutions with Pasumsic or some other lender, and we're in the process of working that out while we work towards some kind of a vote from the vote, you know, a bond vote from the voters, 6 months or 9, whenever it happens down the road, sometime in the next 6 to 9 months probably, is that appropriate? And he said at this point, I think it's the best anybody could expect you to do. So I felt good about that answer. I think he's right. I can't think of any other way out of this because we can't ask voters for something that we don't fully understand, and we don't understand it till we get the clean audit at the end of this year. So the goals are, 1, get the general fund out of deficit mode, and Chip will speak to this some. The council began making moves in that direction with its vote on Monday night to consolidate any money we have in whatever accounts they may be that has been committed but not legally restricted, to make it available to help us with cash flow. And so that will be one chunk of what we have to do there, and then we'll have to work with Pasumsic or someone to figure out some kind of a short-term borrowing instrument to deal with the rest. And then we would have to have, what Bob was suggesting is that we would come up with a council-approved plan short-term with Pasumsic to deal with that next question, right? And then we would look toward a longer-term solution, which is a bond anticipation note to pay off using the council-approved plan to pay off the LOC, the line of credit with Pasumsic, and that will eliminate the due to others line on the water and sewer balance sheet. Please correct me, Chip, if you think I'm saying something inappropriate here. And then finally, we'll have the audit from the bond bank. I think I've covered everything. Then we can go to the bond bank and say, here, you know, what do you need us to do in order to get ready for longer term debt service?
And we still have to consider the $800,000 bond for the fire truck.
Yes.
Which is in that conversation, but there was also, I think we went back to the lease possibility or finding someone who would borrow that $800,000 from, like, you know, vehicle loan or whatever, that would allow that then to pay that off over.
Correct. And I've actually had a very brief first conversation and an email exchange with the company that the Vermont Bond Bank was recommending we talk with,
yes,
called Municipal Leasing Corporation,
right,
I think. So yeah, that would be treated separately,
yes,
from the rest of what we're talking about here. And we have time to arrange on that one, right? Because we're not going to take possession of that vehicle until at least the end of September, it looks like, maybe later.
yeah.
Chip, do you want to, is there anything you feel like I've missed in that summary or misstated?
Well, no, for Tuesday, that's the events. Next Tuesday, there's even been more knowledge gained.
Yeah, you want to catch us up on that?
Sure, I'll give it a shot. I see Jim sitting at the head of the table, right?
Yes, Jim's here.
Okay, so during that conversation, PSD, Sussex Savings Bank, wanted around $300,000 to be paid down on a construction line of credit, of which the books reflect there's a little over $800,000 on that line of credit today. I believe the line of credit for construction was somewhere in the $2.4 million range for the water tower. The water tower, we think, has a balance due for construction of $1.8 million. So conveniently, if we buy down 300 of the line of credit, we'll have $1.8 million on a construction line of credit that we can draw on again to pay the bill for the completion of the tower. That construction line of credit, in my humble opinion, still sits there and will be there until we can convert that to a bond anticipation note, in which again, it pays off the line of credit. And then the bond bank in turn converts the bond anticipation note or this construction loan, if they allow us to keep it. We'll pay that off over a 30-year period, theoretically, the life of the tower. And that is all related to Fund 9, the water fund. And today, the water fund is owed $9,000 from the general fund, based upon activity that we took to close cash accounts and combine them into general fund cash. At my last check with the reports that I sent to Carter this afternoon, the general fund checkbook has over $2 million in it now, in which 2 weeks ago we'd be down under 300,000 or less, based on the activity that we've done just to consolidate cash. For those worried about the reserve funds disappearing, actual liability accounts were set up today and booked to reflect that we still have committed funds in water and sewer that are no longer cash accounts. They're just liabilities sitting on the balance sheet. So that's one of the major things. And so the new thing was, I didn't know you had a construction line of credit, and that's what the bank was aiming, I think, to replenish the 1.8 million to pay the next set of bills. So that's money in, money out.
Chip, can I ask a question? So when you say construction line of credit, is it a revolving so that when we pay the 300,000, it frees up more principal? Or have we, if it's $2 million and we owe, I don't know if this is the right number, we owe 900,000, but they want 300, they take out the interest, but we are allowed to re-borrow the whatever principal is left on the 300? Is that how that's set up?
I believe your line of credit for construction is 2.4 million.
Okay.
And you've used it, you've paid it down because you got reimbursed for some of this project. And that reimbursement paid it down, and now you need to pay it down enough to get the 1.8 that your cash flow projection is to finish the tower and pay for it.
Okay.
I think that's what's going on with DSB related to that 300,000. When the project is all done, I believe that the attorneys agree that if we've got something that PSP can work with, they can convert that to a bond anticipation note for 1 year. And within that 1 year, we work with the bond bank to convert that into a 30-year note.
Okay.
Simultaneously, the bond bank was talking about restructuring the SRF loans that are also in water to consolidate all of that into one long year note, depending on the life expectancy of those SRF notes now. So that's the piece that relates to water. And because we closed the cash accounts in water, that brought the water fund to being owed $9,000 from the general fund instead of owing the general fund, owing the general fund $700,000. It's a huge swing simply by moving money. So I did send the interfund balances as of today to Carter, which she may be able to pull up, I don't know.
Yes, we can pull it up.
Because when we met, the last time that we met, we were looking at water, sewer combined of nearly $2 million to the general fund. And the action that we've taken has reduced that down to water being owed $9,000 and sewer owing $1,053,000. So both are in a much better position than they were 2 weeks ago.
Okay, let's see.
Then relative to sewer, there is no projects in sewer that are ongoing for construction. And sewer is the one that has, if you will, spent general fund dollars over the years because it didn't raise enough money in user fees for operations and debt payments. So the go to the voters concept, in my opinion, is that you go to the voters for a general obligation note on behalf of sewer for some amount, which right now I'm thinking is going to be between $1.3 million and $1.5 million, to just bring sewer to a point where it has replenished the general fund checkbook and has a term of 10 or 15 years to pay that $1.5 million back plus interest to whoever lends us the money. However, the bond bank did indicate that they could restructure sewer debt as well and may be able to absorb this loan amount, depending on the life expectancy for the given debt that sewer fund has. So if we're lucky, the bond bank may be able to restructure all debt for water and sewer. Then for the general fund, so now that you've got that on the screen, I'll just point out that this is today's interfund balances between the accounts. I hope you can see it.
Yes.
The general fund basically is owed just over $1 million, when last week or 2 weeks ago, that number was $1.9 million.
Okay.
So all we did was manage our cash better to get you in a position to where the indebtedness of the other funds has been greatly reduced, but they also have no cash assets.
Right.
Now, I gotta roll that up because it does sum to zero, and you can see that the primary amount owed comes from the sewer fund,
Yes. Uh-huh.
okay?
Yep.
The water fund that sits at $9,000 to the good, as soon as we pay $300,000 on the construction loan, it's gonna switch to being $299.99 now owed to the general fund. So that's how quick these numbers will shift.
Okay.
So the key here is we have made vast improvements just by moving cash to the interfund balance obligations. And right now, if you can, Carter, grab the balance sheets as of 2025-05-23. Primarily what I want to show you on the balance sheets for just the general fund, which is the fund for taxation.
Is this looking like the right one, Chip?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So our position relative to cash in the bank, the general fund now has $2 million in it. Partly from closing all these various accounts that exist. And as well, we left Walmart by itself because that was deemed the most desirable action to take for Walmart.
Yes.
If you can scroll down,
Yes.
this part of the liabilities, yep, right there's good.
Okay.
You see the $1.8 million that's owed as a tax anticipation line of credit note.
Yes.
That is our problem. We got $1.8 million in the bank, but if we pay that, we're not paying anything else.
Right.
At the bottom of this page, you're looking at the last 3 lines. Reappraisal reserve, 145. That's the amount that was closed at the bank of 125, plus 20,000 that was budgeted to put into reappraisal funds this year by June 30.
Okay.
Record preservation has always been in the general fund, 53 grand, and then the Walmart reserve. That's the offset to the asset of the Walmart money market account. And it is not free and clear the general fund's money. That's why it's got its own offset. And you go to the next page, top. The top number there, $240,800, labeled as NDRC grant funds match. The only place this was referenced was in the restricted, committed, assigned fund balance spreadsheet. Wow. Until today, that amount restricted for that value has never been in the financials. So when looking at financials in the past, the spreadsheet said you had a commitment and it totaled that commitment, but it never was reflected in your financials.
But what is it?
I believe it's meant to be the tax dollars as the local share for the Causeway project.
Right. That this is, in order for the 250,000 to come from Northern Border Regional Commission, this was our match, which I've always thought of as just part of the $500,000 it's going to cost the city to get this project over the finish line. Right, Chip?
Which I don't know the answer to the Causeway project nor any other of your grant-funded projects. We just recently started talking with Frank and trying to piece together how and why some things exist the way they do. But the auditors, I believe, were using a spreadsheet to come up with your restrictions, and they were not even identifiable on the balance sheet. So I've clearly laid out 4 different values that are restricted amounts of money in the liability, which heretofore were just named in your audit as restricted money, but not in your financial picture.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so the clean audit question, I don't think you're going to see auditors come until after September. And that's primarily because in the municipal world, there's a 60-day clause for cash collected in the next fiscal year. And that's an adjustment that gets made to the prior year. And that gets done annually. So
you can't close the books until that 60 days has gone by.
Well, technically, we close the books, but we're constantly going back and making adjustments to those books. So they're not really closed.
Yeah.
But we still have access to them.
Okay.
We don't know the answer to the next line down, deferred revenue bike path grant. Thus far, those that I asked don't know why this deferral is here. And if the bike path, all bike path projects are over, then this liability shouldn't exist. But not having a definitive answer, I did not adjust for it.
Understood.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
And then if you scroll down just a little bit more, you'll see that our fund balance from prior years has altered greatly to be 519,000 to the good. And the auditors have reported that you had 1,411,000 deficit in your unassigned fund balance. And simply by the action, I believe, taken February 27th by council, that all committed funds were being relieved. So in this spreadsheet, in this document, are all the funds balance sheets. The general fund is the one I wanted to bring to your attention primarily because that's where our cash is. That's where we borrow our line of credit. And that's where, if you will, we needed the money to pay bills for everybody. So we're in a much better financial position for cash to pay bills than we were a week ago and 2 weeks ago.
And Chip, I think I know the answer to this, but I saw some emails from you about your concern that we needed to separate the school funds entirely out of this picture. And I assume you've done that because I didn't see the obligation for the school anywhere in that list of liabilities.
It's been paid.
It got paid this week, Jim? That's good news. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So the cash account right after taxes got collected got up as high as $3.4 million, but 2.5 of it went out the door to school.
Right.
Right? So, and we knew that's an obligation you have regardless. You may have to go borrow money to pay the school. So we avoided that.
That's great news.
Okay, so
I don't know if any of this is.
Carter, I really don't want to bog the committee
Yeah.
down with the rest of the balance sheets.
Yeah,
It's primarily the general fund that I wanted to draw the attention to.
great.
That's had a lot of cleanup on it. There were many bank accounts listed that didn't truly exist, so most of them were under $500, so we made adjustments to get rid of them.
Great.
If you could bring up what I sent to you, revised 2025-05-23 restricted committed assigned fund balances.
Yes. I have a feeling it's this one. Let's see.
So the copy that was on the shared drive, I did not do any manipulation on. I made my own copy and then began to take action in that spreadsheet,
Let me,
which I
yes.
Do you need to forward it to
see it
the
made.
I'm gonna make sure it's in the right, I put it in the right spot. Oh, I hadn't added it. There we go, see? Oh, why can't you see it? Try again.
got you locked out?
Yeah, I have you, the city manager account, so. Sorry, gang.
It's okay, take your time.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay, gonna go in here. It's not called copy, it's called.
No, it starts revised
That's what it is.
2025-05-23.
Oh. Okay.
I did not modify your original.
Okay. You know what? It's fun on my end too. Let me see. Share. Oh, okay. Oh. It's on restricted mode. Anyone. Oh. All right, we're getting somewhere.
Okay. There you go.
Great. Great.
So the names are on the left. What I want you to scroll over to where we can see 2 more columns.
Scroll over this way.
Yes.
That's important. Let me see if I can. Around here.
So
Okay.
if those who have access to the shared drive can look at those. The action that I did within this spreadsheet was in the column that is column M, projected 6/30/25 balances. I populated that based upon what the so-called carry forward from 24 was to 25, the either additional income and expenses occurred in 24-25 to a projected 6/30/25 balance. And you'll see that if you scroll down to the bottom of the column that's highlighted, that in the colorized area, there's an obligation of $1,529,951.58. And in column P, all of those committed balances were removed. And that is the vote that the City Council made on February 27th. And with this spreadsheet as a guide, I want them to be able to see the projected value and the fact that by giving up that projected value, they have reduced their obligation, if you will, their committed numbers, down to $835,173,984. And that number is all 4 of the restricted liabilities that you're required to carry by third party. What could change that number is if whether any of the 240,800 actually has been spent in 25 from our matching grant contribution. If it's been used, that'll reduce this number. So importantly is that took your fund balance from a deficit to a surplus.
Wow.
As well, in the current year, on the balance sheet that we were looking at before, right now you are running an $800,000 surplus in 25. And my intention would be that the City Council actually make a motion to not contribute to any of these reserves as budgeted in the fiscal year 25 budget. And primarily that's because, again, you budgeted, I think, $215,000 of municipal tax adjustments, which is not any extra money. And so it would contribute to a deficit if you, in fact, did contribute the funds from 25 that were budgeted. And we're trying here to get to where the taxation general fund is not in deficit at the end of the year.
So,
It may not have enough money for its restrictions, but that money is owed from the other funds. Okay? Fund accounting is complicated in that way, but if you've been doing it long enough, you can talk about it. So that's a significant shift, and that's where my revised grid provides a look at, what you're giving up and the explanation as to why you're giving it up. Your next year budget is already in half. Bill has in it a budgeted number for the municipal tax adjustment, which needs to be raised by taxes. It is not extra income, so they'll have to set the tax rate to include more money than what was listed in the budget.
And that's a
I
function,
believe that in '26, you could make all the commitments and start the committed funds over again.
and the action you're saying we need to make to cover that roughly $250,000 shortfall, that's a council decision, right? We can, because the council, or is that simply a function of the treasurer's office? The treasurer does it.
We set the tax rate down.
So,
But the council got to say, they don't want to put that, they want to put that adjustment, doesn't want to be a separate line, doesn't be in the tax amount, that's the tax amount.
I see. Okay.
But if we wanted to collect it now, you could go back to the taxpayers and ask them to pay more taxes currently to make that up.
no,
No.
No,
the tax year effectively is already over.
the 20, you're talking about the
425.
425. You're talking about adding it, but we have a budget for 25, 26 already that's been approved.
Yes, but what the voters approved was the budget, not the necessary tax rate to meet it. So what I hear Chip saying, please correct me if I'm wrong, Chip, is that it's an administrative action to say we need to calculate the tax rate differently in order to meet this obligation.
No, it wasn't in, that 200,000 or 250,000 wasn't in what we approved as taxpayers. What we approved is the amount that the budget said that we would owe. The difference between what we normally collect in some way other than from the taxpayers and the amount that we pay to make up for the amount you're going to spend. We approved a certain amount of money that only covers everything that's already in the budget. You're wanting to really raise another 200,000. In order to do that, you have to go back to the taxpayers and ask us to pay another $200,000.
I'm not sure I'm right, but I'm not sure I agree with your premise. So I want to hear, Chip, how you respond to that.
That's fine.
Because my sense is that the budget was correct. What wasn't correct was the way the accounting was being done about that money coming back from the state for the homestead portion of the tax, right? Or am I-
Yes.
So can you
That
describe
money when
that?
it comes in is property tax money. It is not excess money in another revenue line.
Say
And
it.
when the council also sets the budget, they also add to the amount to be raised by taxes, all of the appropriations that are passed.
That doesn't explain, what is the 200,000 that we're getting, that's up there for that state thing? What is that coming in as income? No, it's not coming in as income because we
Hold
treat
on,
it.
let me answer your question.
Spreadsheet? So are you referring on this spreadsheet to the $240,800?
I think that's the amount that you have down, or we have down on the budget as state something something, and we have it coming in as income.
You're talking about the state adjustment, Chip.
Oh, in next year's budget.
Yes.
Because I've got that.
Right there, Carter, right?
Oh, great. Oh,
Third
yeah.
line down under the first column, that was in 23.
That's those match funds.
Oh no, that's the match fund one, so it wasn't the 248.
Matching fund.
I don't know if it'll be in this one. Because this is just the.
You have scheduled $220,000 in the FY 25-26 revenue stream as state municipal tax adjustments.
And that's income we're not going to get. I mean, that isn't income you're telling us.
It is money that we're going to get, but it's not income, right, Chip? Because
It's not excess property taxes. It's a payment from the state on behalf of a bunch of individual taxpayers.
that's the piece right there.
And you've been doing this in your budgets. As I look at this in the spreadsheet, I'm sure if I open it up wider, you've been budgeting over $200,000 every year as if it's extra money, and you've shorted yourself on calculating the property tax rate. Because that's never been extra money.
But what
To
we,
prove,
but what the taxpayers,
reporting,
Go ahead, Chip.
what you've been reporting on your budget status report, you've always kept the educational taxes in your actual property taxes, and then reported only when you spent the money through the expenditures. So the budget status report always looked like you were carrying $5, $6, $7 million worth of surplus, and you never were. So the financial reports that have been presented have been so skewed just by the educational tax and further by the state municipal tax adjustment being treated like it's extra money. So if you continue to do that in 26, and everything works perfect to exact budget revenues and expenditures, you will be $220,000 in deficit. Because that's not extra money.
so we didn't say, what you're saying is the taxpayers should have paid a lump sum of money that includes $200,000 extra.
Yes.
And therefore,
So-
what we should have told the taxpayers when we put out the warrant was that in addition to whatever money that they were going to pay in the city, they were really going to have to pay $200,000 more than that.
120, yep.
So when we didn't tell the taxpayers that they were going to have to pay another $220,000, they didn't approve that. They only approved the lesser sum from which the tax rate was calculated, the lesser sum. In order to have the taxpayers pay a higher tax rate because the $220,000 should have been included in what they agreed to pay in taxes, you need to go back to the taxpayers and ask them to pay another $220 so that the tax rate can be raised. We only agreed to pay the lesser sum. We did not agree to pay another $220,000. You can't simply raise the tax rate because that's the sum we agreed to. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm saying
I hear you.
that's it.
Yep. So, opportunity, if someone wants to note it, if we end up, before tax bills go out in 26, and we end up with the city holding a special meeting to authorize a general bond obligation for sewer, then we have a separate article that states this additional need.
Okay. I have two other questions.
So hold on. I just want to make sure we're not rushing past this.
Fine.
Because I appreciate the point you're making. And all I want to know is what are we legally obligated to do?
Another warrant that adds the $200,000.
But what I hear Chip saying is, right, the ideal way to do this would be if we're going to go back to the voters regarding the water and sewer bond anticipation note.
It's really sewer.
Sorry, the sewer bond anticipation note. There will be a number of things that we're asking the voters to consider, and this would be one of them.
Right.
Okay.
That's how
Two,
your council wants to do it, yes. So,
I want to go back to the agreement that the taxpayers made initially with regard to the water tower. We agreed about $5 million minus any grant money that was received would be willing to pay that in a bond. And that has turned out to be about $3 million once you take out the grants. Now, that's how much we agreed could be the obligation then, $3 million. We took a line of credit, contract kind of line of credit, to pay people who were building that structure. That's all we agreed, that there could be an obligation basically of $3 million. We did not agree that then we could pay it, that you guys could pay it down, and then we get that extra 1.8 million, because to me that sounds like you're saying the citizens agreed to pay a $4.8 million obligation off, because you're giving us credit for that 1.8 that you paid down, and then that would be a line of credit of $4.8 million plus the grant money. I think there's a problem in that. Think about whether or not we are being obligated with respect to 4.8 million when we only agreed on 3 million because the grants took away the 2 million. And if that's so, we need to do something else with respect to a warrant again to get people to agree to it if they want to. But I think that when you do that, when you start with the 3 million, pay 1.8 million down, and then get another 1.8 million credit out of that, that's a 4.8 million obligation, which we did not agree to. Are you with me or not?
I think you're combining two different obligations.
No, I'm talking just
Hold
one.
on, let him respond, please.
The general fund has a line of credit of $1.8 million. The water fund had a construction loan line of credit for $2.4 million. That construction loan is down to $800,000. And in order to pay another $1.8 million on the project, we have to buy down $300,000 of the present line of credit so that we can finish paying for the project. That project is over, as you already know, more than $3 million. But the city's share is going to come in around $3 million. And it will be long-term debt when the bond bank can take it over.
Okay, so you're saying we're only going to pay, the citizens are only going to pay $3 million worth of that loan.
Water.
There's two lines.
The water users.
The water users are only going to pay $3 million all told, not going to pay any more than that obligation. All right, and then the last thing I wanted to ask you about is your intent upon saying that the monies that were taken out by the council and put into the general fund from the individual funds have what you call an obligation in them, and that would be a liability binding future councils to putting that money back in there. Some of that money went in there when there was no money in the funds to go in there. It shouldn't have gone in there to begin with.
There was no asset from which it could be taken.
There was no asset from which it could be taken. So that was about, I would think that's in the order of at least 300,000 roughly that I'm talking about that went into funds when we didn't have any money to put in them. So it was just like paper on paper. In addition to that, if the council has a right to take that money out and use it in the general fund anyway, why is there an obligation to put it back? It's not like they're taking it and throwing it down the sewer. They're using it for something legitimate that they were allowed to use, could be allowed to use it for anyway. So I think why do we need this obligation? Why do we need to have an obligation for those funds at all?
Because Ann and I have talked about this a couple times, and I think the way it sounds in my head, and I could be wrong, but I think the way my head is going about it is, you know, you sit down at home and you write down all the things you think you want, and you start putting money into it. But 10 years down the road, you got $5 here and $2,500 there, and then you restructure what you think you want. And so I think what you're saying is some of that stuff that we've sort of said over the last 15 years is we want these things, but maybe in a few years we really don't. Is that what you're saying?
Sure.
And so
why have an obligation at all? We can start anew on the things that we want to put money into, and then we won't have this liability. So I sort of need a thought on that from you. You are the one who mentioned obligations. I was just ready to take the money out.
Okay, so we can do the reversal of those liabilities, and I didn't show that balance sheet, but we certainly can. Carter, if you want to bring back up the balance sheets as of, and go to the last page.
Yes. Is that this one? I wish I could.
Yeah, balance sheets as of 2025-05-23.
Nope. This one.
Yep.
Yep.
And go to the last page.
Okay, I'm gonna zoom
Yeah.
out.
And this is the water fund. And stop, roll back up just a little bit so we see the liabilities.
No, the other direction.
Oh, this one.
Yep.
There you go. So in the group that is 90015, 0102, 03, those are listed as obligation liabilities equal to the amount that was taken from the cash accounts, and we closed those and moved it to the general fund. At the last meeting, my impression was that we did not want to lose track of the reserves simply by taking the money. So I set up these liabilities to represent the amount of cash that had been sitting in reserve. And if in fact council doesn't want to reflect that there's any reserves left in the water fund, we'll reverse these entries.
Where would those liabilities, by the way, appear? They would never appear in the budget. Is that correct?
On the balance sheet.
That's correct. Liabilities are a balance sheet, not a budget.
Yeah, they only show up on the balance sheet. So, Chip, I think you're correct that it was our stated preference at the last meeting not to take on the question of whether or not we were disappearing the obligation as we tried to move the cash around. And I think Ann's point, and I hear you giving credence to it, is valid, that the council can make a decision at some point whether or not that obligation ought to still exist in the way that we created it. I don't feel ready, given everything else that we're tinkering with right now, to try and make that decision today. But it seems to me that at the very least now what we've got is a clear explanation of where we stand, so that if the council wants to look at that 6 or 9 months down the road or a year down the road, that we can do so.
If we have a big surplus, we could say, yeah, we really wanted that, let's move that in here and satisfy.
Yes, or for that matter, if the opposite is true, right? We haven't figured out how to do that surplus. We can say, okay, well, the truth is, you know, we don't want to use it in that direction over there. We need it more over here. So it's going to be an ongoing conversation. And Chip, I'm hearing you say that there's no reason we can't have that conversation. Nothing we're doing here in stating this obligation binds the council.
Yeah.
Right.
Long term.
It's like a placeholder.
And if you go back one page to the liabilities in Fund 8, and you see right there again, listed under 800-1501-2, there's the value of the 2 bank accounts that were closed, the wastewater treatment sinking and the Vector sinking.
Yeah.
So those cash accounts, again, got closed, and those numbers reduced the obligation owed back to the general fund from like $1.6 million to $1,050,000. But by retaining the obligation as the liability, I think it met the desire to not lose track of how much we had in those reserves.
Right, because, you know, if you're somebody, if you're Tom Bernier, and you've been trying to salt money away for 7 years, and it was supposed to be, in your mind, 450, 500 grand that's sitting there now, and in fact, all it is 266. It's a little challenging to say, where'd all that money go? I still need my new truck that's gonna cost us 600 grand plus next year. So I think, you know, what I've tried to do is assure the department heads, and Tom in particular, because he gets hit harder with this than anybody else really, that we are not forgetting, and one way or another, we're clearly going to, the things that we need to operate, we're going to have to take responsibility for next year, however we do it. And honestly, I'm not even thinking about the Vector truck today. So I think it's helpful to have it listed so we know where we thought we were, at least at this moment. It's kind of a snapshot.
But it is interesting to know, that some of those funds, or maybe all of them at this point, depending upon how they were developed, the liability could the council could disappear it, other than a new fund that they are establishing, the capital funds.
Correct. That one that we added a 5% on.
Once that's created, the only way to get that out is to get the approval of the citizens as well. But that's down the line.
Yeah, I think so. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to generation of new funds.
Right.
So with all of that around, again, these documents are what the committee has access to, and I would say at this point, they are public documents. They're being talked about in a public meeting. So one other document that I wanted to try to have you look at.
Yes, please. This is really helpful, Chip.
The VT NEWC budget status report as of 2025-5/23.
Right, the middle one, yeah.
And this is going to be very long, but again, I only really want to show you the general fund condition. It is, I think, 14 pages just for the general fund.
Woohoo. I think this is the right one.
Yes, I think so too.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. So, in this first page, the top 2 lines. One thing to notice, property taxes to be raised, 4,995,594. Probably was exactly what the voters approved
Yes, it is.
by the warning. Up until a week ago, the actual number in that association was over $10 million. And so when you looked at budget to actual, there was no meaning there that was clear.
Because it had all the school stuff in it.
Had all the school money on an accrual basis in it,
Yep.
which doesn't help the city know really where they stand on their budget, because the school is another, what, 20, or 100% more of your entire budget.
That's right. This is so helpful to see it clean.
I added, just to balance the budget, I added the second line down as a budget figure, 177,818. That was in fact added to the amount to be raised by taxes when they set the tax rate.
Yep.
So one would think that the property taxes actual would be 177,810 higher. But they're not. And the reason for that is because down on the line where it says state municipal tax adjustment had a budget of $215,000, which I've already explained multiple times
Yeah.
is not extra money. The actual amount you got was 207, but that was really 207 short in property taxes that ended up being made up by adding the 177,818 in when you set your tax rate. So they happen to somewhat cancel each other,
Yes.
which is the reason that you're seeing this at 99.89% of budget to actual.
So
So
in
the
effect,
illusion here is that you didn't raise any money for appropriations. The reality is the state municipal tax adjustment doesn't belong on this report at all for budget nor actual.
because in
The
effect,
actual belongs in
Chip,
property tax.
in effect, that's because it's already accounted for in line, the very first line of property taxes. Right?
It actually is not accounted for in there.
Should be, but it's not.
It's not accounted for in there because when the tax bill gets adjusted for all of them, for $207,815.88,
Yeah.
that means that the property owner didn't pay in combination, 207,815.88, the state paid it.
So,
They got that in credit on their tax bill and they paid less. So you can't have an extra line when the state paid part of somebody's tax bill. It's not extra money.
So where should that money have been put? Where does it show up, the 207,815?
But this is how you booked it, and you booked it this way for years. As I look at the spreadsheet for the budget prep since 2023, and probably going further back,
Yeah.
you called that extra money.
Right.
That's never been extra.
But when the state gives us a check, where should it show up?
It would go into property tax revenue.
That's what I thought. It goes up into that upper line. Okay.
Yes, it's an actual entry, yes.
And it's just part of that total of 4.990 in the actual there.
Yes,
Got it.
yes.
That's okay. Then my head is wrapped around this one. Yep.
Yeah.
Can I try that?
Unfortunately, though, you didn't set your tax rate
I got
to
you.
include that having to be raised.
so are you saying, Chip, that instead of going out to the voters for $4,995,000, we should have gone out for the 4,995 plus the 215?
Correct.
Yep.
Because the 215 wasn't excess revenue. It
That's
wasn't
right.
more revenue.
That's right. Okay. Got
And it
it.
hasn't been for 10 years, and 200,000 times 10 hits 2 million. So no wonder you don't have the cash.
Right. It's the other half of the problem that I kept saying I knew we had, but I couldn't figure out where it was. When I kept saying $2 million of a deficit, the sewer owed to operations is only half our problem here, because by logical, if just rational logic, if we had $1.5 million to $2 million in cash reserve some number of years ago, and now we not only don't have that, we're $2 million in the hole. We've in fact we've misaccounted for $4 million somewhere, and this is the other half of it. I think that Chip has discovered. It's the operations side that we did. So from here on,
Yeah.
that line for state municipal tax adjustment needs to come out entirely on the income side, and if anything, it would be only delineated as a reduction in the property tax that we're going to receive as kind of a subcategory of that
No.
property tax.
No,
No?
no, it is property tax. It's just the difference between you paying my bill and me paying my bill.
Right, I'm just saying,
Still property tax.
right, I think we're agreeing. I'm just saying it's part of the overall $5 million in property tax that we're counting on. 4.995, yep.
No, it's not.
Yeah, so it'd been 5,200,000.
It is part of it,
210,000.
yeah.
No,
have to add-
remember that the property tax that we collect is calculated, that the supposedly 4.9 is calculated to be, it should be the difference between the liabilities that we're gonna have that year and the total income that we're getting from other sources. And we make up the difference, the citizens make up the difference.
But
Yes.
So what is the
problem-
liability for this year? What, if you scroll down, how much were we gonna owe total?
Joyce, is it way towards the bottom?
So if you go all the way down to, I think, maybe it's page 14, which is the end of the general fund.
Okay, yeah, it's like,
You're still in general fund, there you go. Keep going right there. City landscaper, keep
Keep
going.
going, yep.
okay. Administration, votes. Looking for liabilities, right? Okay. Ooh, I
There's a
feel,
lot of stuff going on.
yeah. Liability. Oh, keep going.
Keep going,
Darn.
keep going. There's the bottom. Now go back up to that last page right there's good.
Okay.
Okay. So, notice that the total general fund line on the bottom of this report, our budgeted revenues equal our budgeted expense, so that the budget for revenue anticipation matches the expenditures. Up until 2 weeks ago, that number was a minus 177,818. And that was because the budget never got adjusted for all the appropriations that the voters said they wanted you to pay. And as of today, none of those obligations have been paid. Before June 30th, the general fund will have to spend 177,818 to pay all these obligations the voters said to pay. In the second column under actual, it says right now you're carrying a surplus. Revenues exceed expenditures by $898,000. We have a month left to go, and I just gave you $177,000 worth of expenditures I know you have yet to pay.
Yep.
I'm hoping, again, that the city council will say that all of our commitments in the budget to the reserves that existed in that spreadsheet, we will not be contributing in the current budget so that we do not run a deficit,
Understood.
right?
Yep.
Because you will have another month worth of expenditures, payroll, accounts payable, that'll chew up that. And we already know just from above, 177,818 is going to be spent out of our appearance of a surplus of almost $900,000. This number would appear as if you had $5 or $6 million of surplus all year long because educational tax dollars
Hit it.
were booked in the revenue stream, but not showing as an expense until you paid them. And so until you paid the school, you never knew where you were on your own budget.
So Chip,
So
if you take the total expenditures that we expected to have, and then you took the total income from all other sources other than our property taxes, would those two sums add up to the 198 or whatever you have down there at the bottom? So in terms of total income, you have to come up with 7.183, right?
No, that total is 7,322,161.
Oh, I can't read it. Okay, so 7,322. How do we come up with the 7,322? We come up with it in monies paid to the city by other means other than taxes, plus the property taxes. So what was the total amount of money paid to the city other than by property taxes?
So when you, in order to see the relationship,
Yeah, I just want to
You have
make
to go
sure
back.
that we're working with the right number for what should the property taxes have been.
so I would recommend that you obtain a printout of this so you can check it,
Okay,
primarily because the budget's summed to zero for general fund now. They did not 2 weeks ago.
Right. So
The
Carter,
budget to actuals were so overstated by education 2 weeks ago, and now all you're looking at is what your general government obligations to raise money and to spend money were.
so, and I think the answer to your question, and Chip, please correct me if you think I'm wrong, is that everything on that line is income except the $215,000. That's not real. That $215,000 is part of the 4.995 million for property taxes. It's
what should have been added to the,
no. It's, in effect, it is paying a portion of the property tax that we're not getting from the taxpayers.
Except that we didn't, except that we should have asked for 5.2 and not
That's right.
4.9.
Well, if that was what the,
Yeah,
right, because the 215 is not a separate line of income,
right.
right? It's part of that,
it should be up at property taxes.
That's what I've been
added
trying to say.
property taxes.
Right.
yeah.
So we're all in
Yes.
agreement on that, okay.
And the masking is because the second line down for the appropriations, I had to put that in order to balance the budget. And you see, nothing was collected, if you will, for the tax appropriations. But the reality is, it was collected for tax appropriations. It wasn't collected for state municipal adjustment.
It just disappeared in a different spot, yep.
Yeah.
Yes,
The
because,
two are almost identical and cancel each other.
that's because Jim readjusts what the tax rate, he estimates initially what the tax rate should be, but he waits until, I believe, after the appropriations have all been approved in March. And then he readjusts the rate, adding in the
Yes.
appropriations.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Okay,
And it can't do any of that until the grand list has been finalized sometime in June.
right.
So, yeah, there's a whole process to it, but if the foundation of setting the budget has included an erroneous $200,000 for 10 years, it's taken 10 years to rear its ugly head as a huge deficit.
So that means that
So,
in future, the taxpayer should be paying that liability.
So, yeah, wrong term, but right concept. The taxpayers are going to get another 6 to 9 cents on the tax rate simply because of the budgeting practice that was incorrect.
Just to correct for this coming year,
So,
right, Chip? All that 6 to 9 cents, all that 6 to 9 cents does is correct for this coming year.
Yes,
Right.
it doesn't cover your deficit. So that's the reason why the recommendation, which actually happened before I even got involved, on February 27th, when they said we're going to decommit all the committed funds. That was an attempt to recover the deficit of the $1.4 million. And from the spreadsheet we looked at earlier, that new obligation would have been almost $1.6 million. Almost $200,000 more that we already didn't have.
Right.
But, so that's why that spreadsheet to me is the presentation to City Council. Why? In 25, you will make no contributions to commitments, and you'll de-obligate all those commitments, which was already decided February 27th.
So, Chip, I'm beginning to work on the agenda in my head for June 2nd, which I gotta have done middle of next week. And so I'm hearing you say this is gonna be one of the actions we're gonna ask the council to take at the recommendation of the task force, is to agree to de-obligate the capital expenditures that were budgeted for 24-25. Right?
Yes.
No, it's for this year. We're
25, 26.
It's
No.
really the contribution.
It's 24-25. What we're doing here is we're
I see.
saying
I'm sorry.
we're only deepening a problem that doesn't have to be deepened by taking fictitious money that doesn't exist and putting aside an account for this year. So we're going to ask the council not to do what the budget asked us to do a year and a half ago when we passed it.
This one, this is 23. This is from
The 24-25 budget.
This is 24, 25.
We're going to we have not yet made those transfers, and we're saying we're not going to, right? We're
Only
de-obligating.
on one.
And that will eliminate the deficit for that year.
It will. Good question. Does that in fact eliminate the deficit for that we're experiencing for 24-25? Will we finish in the black if we do that?
It is my hope that you will finish in the black.
From your lips to God's ears.
That's all right. That's all right. I already committed that you're not going to find any more than $3 million for water. And I don't know what the hell that number is really going to be.
Right.
But it is $5 million less whatever our grants were.
Yes.
And that's what will happen.
Okay, so I want to ask a question.
Okay.
So I've just been thinking about this. So if the voters on March the whatever it was voted for a budget of 5.267 million for 25, 26, even that number is not correct.
But
We
depends.
think that number is
Yes.
not correct.
So I don't know how the article is worn,
Yeah.
but your expense budget is far more than 5.267,700.
Yeah.
That's the budgeted number to be raised by taxes.
Yeah, well, that doesn't include a portion, what are they called?
Appropriations.
The appropriations, that doesn't include the appropriations, that's just the budget. That's the general obligation to cover liabilities of the city of Newport. And that's for including amounts approved by the voters as appropriations or assessments, and authorize the city to assess a tax in addition to the amounts. So that's how it reads. That doesn't include.
So the vote,
Yeah.
so the article does not state what your expenditure budget total is.
No, it just tells us that we're willing to pay a certain amount in taxes. So it should have been not only the amount that we said, but plus the other 200,000. Should have been in there.
Municipal, yeah, it should have been in there.
So that's why we're getting we're going back to the citizens, and we're asking them to approve the additional 200,000 so that the rate could be adjusted.
Maybe, because another way to do this is to do the same thing for next year that we're saying we're going to do for 24-25, which is de-obligate the money that we said we were going to put aside in special long-term capital expenditure savings, and use that money instead to make up this $200,000 deficit plus whatever other things we're going to have to play with this year.
I don't know whether or not you can do that with respect to the capital money that you assigned in water and sewer.
Maybe not water, sewer, but operations.
This is general.
Yeah, right. We're talking about operations. The
That's
question is, do we have more than $220,000 sitting there? I suspect we do. Although I wrote them pretty hard about not trying to save next year, so maybe we don't. I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah. So nowhere in your warrant article does it say, so the taxpayers or voters of the city of Newport authorize expenditures in the amount of $7,604,342.90 with $5,267,700.20 to be raised by taxes. Your expense line, your expense budget is not presented at all.
That's right. That's right.
So, city council can then say, well, we're just not going to spend the money because they committed so much to be raised by taxes, we're going to cut $220,000 of expenditures because they don't approve an expenditure budget. They only approve the amount to be raised by taxes.
That's right. That's another way to do this. Cut the expense side.
Right?
Yeah, that's a good point, Chip.
So again, all of these are choices that can be explained to and the city council decide.
Yep. Okay.
And my goal really in the last 2 weeks, besides just moving cash so that it can be utilized to pay the bills without borrowing, because you can't borrow anymore, was to also try to say, how do we get this budget status report to mean something?
Yes.
And that's primarily the school. And so I've spent, and you'll see, a minimum of 4 hours every day, not sleeping at night thinking about it, of how to get you out of the $1.5 million deficit in the taxation fund, and how to reduce the obligation of water sewer back to the general fund, and to be able to get you to June 30th. And I know it's not going to be done within 2 months, but I want the bank to feel confident that you're taking appropriate action and that you have really vested putting money into that bank. And I think you're in a much better position than you were 2 weeks ago.
Clearly.
When council agreed to
Just knowing where the bleeding is to stop it.
Say that again, Travis.
Just knowing where the bleeding is to stop it. That $2 million that was missing with the adjustment.
200 grand a year. And, yeah. So Chip, tell us as we wrap up here, what your next steps are. Last night when you were lying awake thinking about next steps, what were you thinking?
Last night is what we did today. I gave, 10 or 12 journal entries to Jim to make. Jim has made them so that we have some reports to present to the committee that are what the financials say today.
Yeah.
That may, for the first time, mean something of value to you all. I still have balance sheets beyond the general fund to look at.
Yeah.
We still have to resolve the grants. I know Jim has done a cash flow presentation relative to the bank. And my understanding is that if we can pay down $300,000 on the line of credit for construction for water, but turn around then and increase use of that line of credit for $1.8 million so that we can pay the bill to finalize that. Well, the tower's already built, probably in service. We just haven't paid the bills for it yet.
So let me just ask a question about that before you hold your thought there. Don't lose it. But I don't think you need permission from the council to pay that $310,000 or whatever it is on the line of credit.
It's an accounts
I don't
payable.
believe so.
It's an accounts payable and it's a distribution of cash accounts.
Right.
It requires a warrant.
Just a matter of having enough money to do it, so we don't mess up on the regular operations of the city.
Understood. So that's something you and I can look at and we can do anytime and just include it in the AP warrant.
And we can pay it today, but like Chip said, you got a month to go of operations, so.
Yes, but a big part of the month to go for operations is we're going to start getting the bills on the water tower.
That's correct.
And we can't pay any of those until we pay this back. So this seems to me to be a very high priority.
Exactly.
So,
If the bank agrees that they're going to keep that line of credit, you pay 3 plus interest, and then they turn around and give you $1.8 million to pay your next bill for that tower.
okay, so that's the question that you and I need to ask
I
Ellen.
don't know if they'll give us a whole $1.8 million.
That's what we need
I
to
don't know
ask.
what the balance is. You know, what is the balance owed on this project? I don't know those numbers.
No, we haven't got it yet, so we don't know what it is.
Do we know if we're at least
Frank
within
seemed
budget?
to, oh, sorry.
Do we know if we're at least within budget? Like what they-
Frank
Oh,
seems
it'll
to
be
think
within
it's
the 5
coming in
million
under.
that the board has authorized, but
Okay.
But there are $1.8 million left.
I talked to Frank about the grant the other day, and he told me he thought the project was gonna come in under, not a ton, but under.
Okay, so but let's go find out. Jim and I will go find out from Ellen and Kate, and just make sure that the calculation is correct. If we pay the 300 down, does it free up 1.8 that we think we may need to finish the water tower?
To pay the
I think it
project
does. I
final
think-
bill.
Right.
I think it does. I think the significance of the 306, they won't lend us any more on the.
That's exactly what I've been understanding.
Something doesn't seem to be adding up right now with respect to the project. I think was going to supposedly cost $5 million. ARPA funds, I believe, paid $2 million. That means it should be $3 million out of the citizens' pocket. And you have said, so there's only $3 million that's supposed to be left to be paid. And you've said that of a $2.4 million line of credit, we've used how much?
You have outstanding right now $800,000. I don't know if you've used your full capacity in that line of credit. You draw on the line when you need it. You don't get cash and hold the whole line.
Right, but it would seem to me if we've got 800,000 left, we've paid
No, not that we have
1.6
left.
million.
We've spent 800,000.
Right.
Oh, we spent 8.
Right.
For like engineering.
We've drawn on that construction line of credit $800,000.
So we should have 1.6 million
1.5
left.
or 6, roughly.
Okay.
And that's why part of the reason that we're that we have to pay this 300 back is so that will allow us to draw up to the 1.8 necessary, is at least what I've been told, what we're trying to do, though I don't understand, I haven't been inside these numbers.
Okay.
Okay?
And I don't know what the balance is on the project that's owed.
Yeah, I
I haven't
think,
gotten the invoice.
so that's the other question, is where we are on that. But
Yeah.
Jim and I will ask those questions. That's a really helpful.
Okay.
Okay, so you were in the middle of explaining next steps, Chip.
And so then, the other piece, the bank was going to try to see if they could extend the general fund tax anticipation note line of credit that's at $1.8 million. This is separate from water sewer money altogether. It is just general taxation. I think it relates to 10 years of $200,000 worth of budget calculation problems that it's grown to this number. To pay that off, Jim was already talking about a $2 million tax anticipation note to get you to your first tax payment in November, to simply have general fund money to pay general fund bills, separate from the water sewer. So for my next steps is to continue down the rest of the balance sheets, justify the numbers that are on them. And if I see something, hairy-carry, we'll point away at it. One of the things that, or two of the things, we have the Gardner Park project. Done, almost done, not nearly done. Grants are in, grants need to be applied for, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that given project has $51,000 sitting in the Recreation Trust Fund, which I think is fund number 6, that was donated primarily, that are sitting in a bank account that can be used to pay obligations for the Gardner Park. That had one of those colorized numbers in the spreadsheet that anticipated June 30 that it was supposed to be a value of $100,000 left, that I zeroed out. you have about half that amount of money in cash already in its own account sitting in the rec trust. The Causeway project, which is related to the NRBC $240,800 that I booked, in my opinion, for the first time into your financials. Some of that may have already been used and perceived to be the low tax on the project for submission to grant reimbursements for that project.
Right.
So we need to know if any of that is true, then we've got to reduce that obligation before June 30th.
Got
And
it.
realize what that means. The liability goes away, and we convert that to revenue to offset the expenditures for the park that are shown in the budget. And so, like I said, my primary thing now is I got to continue down the balance sheets and ask questions, get answers, and recommend adjustments.
So Chip, I am entirely in line with that. I think that's exactly what the priority has to be. And I have this other thing that keeps nagging at me and keeping me awake at night, which is that the words cash flow certificate from Ellen Stanley keep kind of dancing in my head. Somehow we've got to get to a legitimate projection for cash flow for the next year in order to get Pasumsic or anyone else to give us loans to get us through to those, the bond anticipation note or the tax anticipation note. And I've been assuming that we can't really do that cash flow projection until we've reformed our general ledger. And I've been assuming that that can't really start, or it doesn't make sense to start until you finish the work on going through what you've been doing with a fine-tooth comb and looking at the balance sheet. So I'm just trying to get do I have that order of operations correct in your mind?
So the end result, NIMRIC is never going to be able to forecast a cash flow because the financial software only knows what's been put into it, and it can't project that you've applied for a 200,000 paving grant or a 200,000 structures grant.
Yep.
Or other grant revenue to reconstruct tennis courts or buildings and grounds, money from any other sources. That's your best wild guess as to what you see could be happening in the future. And Jim has already done that kind of projection. And theoretically, if you know your water rates are going up, I assume that particular committee forecasted what's going to happen for the next quarterly payments. I presume they must have done that.
No, that's true. They did do that. Yes, that's true.
Right, and so we anticipate billing in water and sewer, X amount of dollars for each fund, which should flow through cash. But the cash is in the general fund and it compensates through the due to funds, as we've already talked about. So those balance sheets, I don't believe, are that far off. We haven't done or looked at depreciation schedules, changes in balance sheets for long-term debt and construction in process. So those are all entries for fiscal year end that relate to the balance sheets and expenditures. But, I don't see, I can't foresee, and unless you record it as a receivable, I can't see NIMRIC generating some financial report that's an estimated cash flow for the future.
Neither does QuickBooks. It just so happens that I spent an hour and a half this morning with my treasurer for Newport Downtown Development, and we have basically cleaned up and reformulated our general ledger. And in our case, it's a very simple budget. It's 200 grand a year, and it's only got 30 lines in it, right? By and large.
Yep.
There are some complications, but it's pretty simple compared to this. But what we did was we created a 12-month-long projection and then went through it on a spreadsheet. And we said, okay, this is when we think these incomes are going to hit. This is how we project these expenses are going to hit. And every month, our intention is we're going to print our actuals for that month
And adjust it.
lock it in and say this is, and now what do we expect to have happen the rest of the year? And I think that's what Ellen's asking us for.
Yes.
So to get to that, my question is, do we have to wait, in your judgment, until we have a simplified version of our general ledger? Or should we just be going ahead and trying to figure this out? It may be in broad strokes just by department or something like that.
It's broad strokes by fund.
By fund.
By fund. General government, Fund 0. We anticipate in July we're going to get what, and we're going to spend what. And you will get very little, spend very much. If state aid to highways comes in and it's $50,000, you will get no property tax revenue, period. And it's whatever clerk fees may come in, but there's very little flow. Maybe your biggest department to have flow might be recreation.
Yep.
Because that's a pickup time, June, July.
Yep.
But you're going to spend $250,000 on payroll every 2 weeks.
That's correct.
Yeah, what I've been calling my burn rate. Yep.
Yeah, your burn rate.
Yeah.
And besides paying the electric bill, VLCT is twice a year. You know, you have all of those anticipations which you can look at, you know, as a broad stroke. General fund is going to spend so much money, get so much money. Water sewer, spend so much, get so much. The other funds, almost immaterial, because there's not activity in them. And that's where the general fund is going to show that it needs the tax anticipation note to meet its obligations.
So I'll just
And
say,
voters,
I think this is where Colin might come in, because Colin has a lot of experience with spreadsheet work, and I need us to get to something that's something other than a 4-mile long piece of paper this wide that Jim has done on his adding machine to try and come up with this, right? Because we need to be able to have something underneath it that's based on those funds accounts, right? The 00 accounts.
Yes.
And so I'm thinking that maybe this is where we ask folks at the table and Colin to actually begin to get serious about saying, let's project as much as we possibly can, and then month by month we're going to go through and adjust it as we go this year and see how it's actually working. It's going to be.
so you can only, one of the options you can use is to take the last year, 2 or 3, run the reports, and fill in the spreadsheet in aggregate of revenues that came in, expenses that went out for the last 3 years. One of the things that's always consistent is municipalities. We get influx, obviously in November and in May. I think the next time that the city meets, they should move to quarterly payments of taxes. Improve your cash flow.
And I was actually going to
It
ask,
seems like it's more to collect. It's no more to collect, there's just more collection times.
why is it that we're billing water and sewer, I expect, why are we billing those quarterly instead of month to month like other municipalities?
Can you hear that question?
Yeah,
I've never
Yeah.
lived in an area where that's billed quarterly. It's like, from the Houston area, it's always been month to month where I was, and it would, like you said, it increases your cash flow instead of waiting long periods. Why, do you know why the city is billing those quarterly?
so the primary problems with a monthly bill in water sewer is when you try to follow the disconnect notice process, you're given 45 days from the due date to take action. These are huge.
Love it.
Do you like the sound of that?
Love it.
Well, does that
What's
mean
the
that they
cost?
need,
And
Well, yeah.
What's the cost of that though versus?
there is a cost for that, but unfortunately, the advantage is that you folks would eliminate, on, like you were this week, I think the week before taxes were due, you were trying to stuff out the door 1,800 water and sewer bills. Print them, fold them, put them in an envelope, put a stamp on them, send them. When that becomes 15 minutes to upload a file to print them,
Yeah.
and
Does that incur
they, the
overtime?
next day or two, print and mail them out of Burlington. And it's a bulk rate mailing, and it's all pre-sorted. And yeah, it seems weird you're getting your Newport City water bill out of Burlington, but, you know, that's something called efficiency.
Something to think about, it takes the three of us a day and a half, 2 days to get those bills out.
Yep.
And then just that, only that.
Well, does that mean,
If that's all you need.
does that mean that you need half of an employee less in water, in the treasury and clerk's office if they're not doing this job?
No,
Well, not for
Not at
8
all.
days a year or not.
I think what it would do
Hold
though,
on, let Chip answer, because he's the one who's got all this experience
Yes.
with it.
so one would think that because I took work away from them, there's not work to be done. There is work not getting done because there's so much work to do.
That's correct.
And so when I call up there, it's always, I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy. Lately, however, they've taken my phone call and researching what I asked because there is an advantage they will get later. And I think, you know, these reports that we ran as of today are reflective of, hey, these things are starting to make sense and they never did before.
Does that mean that we take the salaries, if we went to the system, that we take the salaries that have been apportioned to water and sewer from the treasury?
I don't know, let's not go there.
Okay.
I got you. I understand your question, it's just not
Okay.
useful today.
yeah.
Lori, I know you want to talk.
No, I'm fine.
We gotta quit.
No, I'm
Yeah,
fine.
I'm like, we're
No,
just,
I don't want to say.
Yeah, I've got to go.
yeah, we can't do that kind of, but you're like,
All right, Chip, I think I better understand the steps, and I think I understand a task that we could take on, working on that cash stuff, cash flow projection stuff, so that's very helpful, thank you.
Yep, and then, will you want or desire next Friday for me to present a motion again, suggested motion for city council?
yes.
Yes, please.
Yes, yes.
I think that's right. I think I've begun to capture them, but if anything you can do to help the task force on Friday next week to make that set of moves would be great.
Yeah, and maybe a couple more will be present and we can,
I will miss next week, but if you guys can do it and pull it together and then
So we'll
we'll
blame him for everything next week. Got
Yep.
that?
good. Wonderful.
Don't call me on Tuesday or Wednesday.
I understand, we have overworked him, and when he left M&T and didn't show up at TSP, I thought he was on his way to Bermuda.
What's the dent in the hours that we've taken on so far?
oh,
Do
that's a
we know?
great question.
Yeah, do you have any idea where we are in billing at this point?
For you.
Well, your minimum billing was 96 hours. You gotta be close to 50 or more by now already.
Yep,
I knew it would go quick.
yep. It's all right. It's the best money we've spent in the city in a long time, as far as I'm concerned.
If you just raise it in taxes. All right,
Now I gotta talk to Ann the rest of the night. Thanks for that.
I gotta go.
Okay, thank you, Chip.
all right. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
Thank
See
you,
you on
Tim.
Tuesday.
Good night, Joel.
Good night, Jim, thank you.
Come on. We done?
I'll sing a song.
So I do think that trying to figure out, this is where Hal and I were trying to sort how to get this cash flow projection going. And what I'm really hearing him say is, take the last 2 years or 3 years or whatever it is, figure out the most reasonable way to consolidate the lines that exist, even though it's not where we want to end up with our general ledger 3 months from now. And try and project for the coming year when we expect expenses and income to hit month by month. Right? And my question is to Colin and the two of you, and maybe Hal and Susie, is there some combination of you that can work on that task? Because I can't. I just don't have enough bandwidth right now to try and work on it. And I'm not a spreadsheet person, as Colin well knows. You know, he shows me how he did stuff, and I'm like, great, that looks great. What's the bottom line here? But I think.
Can just a question, can we instead of meeting as a like this kind of stuff. I mean, maybe we have to put it on, I don't know. But can we, like, maybe without you guys sit here with Colin on a Friday afternoon?
Anytime.
Instead of having a meeting?
Yeah, you don't, you can, in water and sewer, people are doing their own work, they're doing all kinds of stuff, and then they're bringing it back here to this table, so there's a public moment in which
Yeah.
they share what they're working on.
I'm just thinking I think it would be, for me, it would be easier to sit at the table with, you know, all the heads and the spreadsheet guy. and
And we need to find out if Colin's even got time, energy, or inclination to work on this, but.
This
Okay.
didn't scare you?
You know.
No, and this is, I mean, I think Carter was right. It was Carter's idea, and I thought it was a great one, that, you know, what we need is somebody who really knows how to move quickly in a spreadsheet and create the calculations, right? And if we had that, I think there are enough smart people at the table.
Because we're
that y'all
gathering the pieces.
Right.
Yeah.
But Ellen has said to me every time I've met with her, Rick, I can't budge. She keeps calling it a certificate, and that makes me think it's official somehow. But I get the feeling, actually, she just wants to know
It's just
that
certified.
we've just played out all the numbers we can guess at and when we think they're going to hit.
Right. Plus, there's something to be said for the historical data when you attach that to us finally understanding where the bleeding is and that we plan to stop it.
That's right.
A big piece.
Yeah, it's the other half of the balance sheet
Right.
work that he's doing, right? And that balance sheet work is amazing. I mean,
We won't
you
make
think
that
about-
mistake anymore, and we'll have increased rates in water and sewer, so we're moving up.
Right.
Are you sure that a certificate doesn't have to be
No, I'm not sure.
certified by an accountant?
I don't know. I've got to find out from Ellen. That's on my list of things I wrote down. Is when she uses that word, does she mean something specific that I don't understand? Which seems quite likely, actually. The list of things I don't know grows longer almost every moment. So
But the list of things that we will know
we're getting there.
is amazing. Like the relief that this document provided
Yeah.
is amazing. Because, like, you know, you've been asking, well, where are the grants documented? Well, how can we see that? And it's like, well, bam, there's a liability line that way. And that's something that would not weekly.
And he's
but
going to start
bi-weekly.
working that too.
And
We're
how
gonna
did
be
the
reviewing,
auditors
and that-
year over year not catch that issue with how the adjustment was?
I don't know, because that
Well,
one
he said
seems
it
pretty
wasn't-
freaking big to me.
Yeah.
Well, he said, you mean that we're talking about the 240,000?
220.
I mean, 220, but he has said repeatedly, it may not necessarily be in the spreadsheet that the auditors are getting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's the first thing we've hit where I was like, okay, this one feels like, you know, and with every other thing, people have said, well, the auditor said it was okay. And I'm like, well, you're misunderstanding what an audit does, right? What an audit does is it tells you, yes, your books are correct. It doesn't tell you whether you're making good decisions about the books or what your value judgments should be about the books. It's just telling you, yes, your numbers are right.
It only tells you based on the numbers they've been.
That's exactly right. This is the first thing, this one that he's come up with now, where I went, somebody somewhere ought to have raised this question.
That's a
Well,
big account.
That's a big
yeah,
error.
so here's the other thing though, and I'm just speaking from someone who has taken an account, like a couple of accounting courses in my life, and I still go debit, credit, you know, and depending on the fund, like where it's supposed to sit, right? And you know, who knows who was sitting in the office when the money came in and went, oh, this is a credit instead of a debit. And that's where it's set. Does that make sense?
Well, I think it would have been one step removed from there. They can call it what they call it going in, then somebody has to make the accounting moves
Right.
after that.
Right. So I'm
And
just
clearly that hasn't
saying,
been done appropriately.
it just flipped in their brain and went in the wrong place. I'm just,
And they were
purposefully
never
or not.
willing to question it. Never.
What's that?
They were never willing
Okay.
to question
Yes.
So
what was
what?
done,
Yes.
ever.
Yes. What I'm doing right now is my favorite finding a time to meet the when to meet website. It's like the most basic. It's this one. Anyways, I'm gonna send out an email. It'll contain a link, including Colin and this recipient, to figure out when next week, looking at Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, if there's any availability. It will probably be because of our timeline and time constraint. That if you can't make it, I'm really sorry, but you'll see it on Friday. Is my goal if we can find a time with Colin in those windows.
Yeah.
And then whoever can attend, awesome working session, and then we'll report out on Friday in conjunction with the city council recommendations. That's the homework you would have the email. It's okay if you can't. You're a crazy time of year.
And this will not be anything that needs to be recorded or?
Nope.
Yeah,
Are
correct.
you,
Yeah.
are you planning on this meeting next Friday, this time?
Yes.
Fine.
Sans Rick.
Sounds Rick.
Yeah, that's fine.
Rick goes-